This is the Hot Take Hockey Podcast with your hosts, Lucas and John Viveiros.
The Stanley Cup has been awarded. The Vegas Golden Knights win in 5 games over the Florida Panthers. Big Stanley Cup champions 6 years into the Vegas Golden Knights as a franchise in the NHL. Lucas, myself, John, episode 40 of the Hot Take Hockey Podcast. Pretty fitting. Get a solid 40 in at the end of the Cup final. Lucas, man, how are you feeling? I know you were rooting for the Cats to see them finish the underdog story. And I mean, myself, I was down for the underdog story to continue. I thought I was just going to ride it out. But Vegas just showed they're the better team. Obviously, Florida was battling a lot of injuries. I know Vegas was too. But just overall, man, what were your thoughts coming off that Game 5 win for Vegas?
Yeah, I think the best team won the Stanley Cup, and that's what you always want to see, right? Both of us picked Florida off the top of the finals, riding that momentum of them beating some, juggernaut teams, getting all the way to the finals. But, when you look at the teams on paper, when you look at the depth of the lineup that Vegas has and the goaltending they got from Adin Hill, the best team won. And in Game 5, man, it got pretty ugly. Like that second period really turned quickly. And you knew that it was over before the second period ended. And it was almost like, there was almost a feeling of, should they just hand out the cup and not play the third period? Or credit to our Nick Alberga, run the clock in the third period, like beer league, because why even play it? It was a joke, man. Like it was men against boys out there, right?
Yeah, well, I would have been down for that because I had a little alternate. I was so confident Vegas was going to win that game, especially when Kachuk. So I did a little Vegas money line with under 7.5 as alternate goals. So I ended up getting screwed in that aspect. It would have been nice if they just did the beer league in the third period because that would have been under. But anyways, yeah, man, I mean, that got out of hand. I will say we can go more deep, but to me, I look at 3 primary reasons on what happened here. Obviously, we can talk about Adin Hill left and right. We'll get into that discussion. But I think truly we saw, and we talked about it beforehand, the big difference maker for me, yes, the depth, but was the defense group. I think Vegas just showed they're so stacked on defense. Like Florida, yes, they were, I would say, protecting their fourth line, but I think more so they were protecting a couple defensemen there. Like when I compare the bottom pair guy on Vegas, like a White Cloud or Nick Hague playing 18 minutes, and then I look at Josh Mahura just pushing past 10 minutes, that's a massive difference. So the fact that Vegas could just roll, I mean, at one point, bro, I think Pietrangelo was just riding a freaking 4-minute shift or something stupid like that. It was 3 or 4 minutes. The fact that they had the elite defenseman in Pietrangelo. You could even argue at times 2 elite defensemen, adding Shea Theodore in there. You have Cup experience with Pietrangelo, Martinez. McNabb was just a force, part of the misfit group. And then, as I said, White Cloud and Hague. So I think that was one difference. Adding 2 more in, I think the injuries for Florida just completely put them out of the series. I think at the end of the day, Vegas was probably going to win the series regardless. But I think we truly saw how valuable Matthew Tkachuk is, especially in that Game 5. Just producing more creativity in the offense, Game 4 and Game 5. So that was definitely a huge aspect. And I would say overall, just the one difference maker for me was when I look at when we talked about beforehand in terms of the forecheck, I feel like Vegas just did what Florida did all playoffs, just way better. I feel like Florida was just designed to be that hard forechecking team. And I feel like because Vegas has that defense group, so I guess it's tied into the defense group reason, Vegas was able to avoid what Florida was so good at, combined with the fact that Vegas just did what Florida was doing way better. So I feel like if you look at those 3 perspectives, more so obviously Florida just getting injured. I mean, bro, how do you feel about that? Well, we can go into those injuries, details, but just straight out, those injuries are crazy injuries. Those are not minor things.
Unbelievable. Last night I was watching, and the way Aaron Ekblad was playing was just mind blowing to me. I was shocked at some of the mistakes he was making, and just how unsure he looked with the puck and all that. And then you hear after the game that he's got a broken foot that he's had since the first round, dislocated shoulder. It might have been 2 dislocated shoulders. But just the way these guys battle through that is insane to me. So all the credit, but he was obviously a shell of what he should be.
Yeah.
And Matthew Tkachuk, the fact that he didn't play, right, you knew that it was something serious because that guy, he's a battler. So he would have been in if it was, a high ankle sprain like Gudas had, which is also is a pretty tough injury. Yeah. But damn, man, give the guys credit. I was just gonna say, not to interrupt, I want you to go back to you for a second, but I was just gonna say so I just talked about the defense group.
Florida's top 3 defensemen had major injuries. Like Montour, obviously Ekblad you just talked about. Like those injuries are nuts on Ekblad. And then Gudas as well. And Gudas came back. Those are 3 of the big time. And like even with the injuries, they were still pushing 23, 24. I think Montour with these injuries, he still was pushing like 27, 28 a couple games. Like that's psychotic, man. Like I honestly, it's hard to say. I mean, going back to you here, like, I don't even know if Florida ever had a chance in those circumstances.
No way. I mean,
like knowing what we know now.
Yeah, knowing what we know now. And also just, when you really just look at the arcs of these two teams, Florida was just riding such a high for so long that, it wasn't the means of their play throughout the season. I mean, we all knew that they were punching above their weight, right? This whole way through. Yeah. They were playing better than what their team and the sum of their parts. Where Vegas, they were just playing like they have like the potential they should be playing at. They're such a good team all throughout the lineup. And I liked what you were talking about with the depth. Like, I'm going to take Kolasar, Waugh, and
like Carrier.
I'm going to take these guys over Eric Stahl and Ryan Lomberg. No shade at these guys, but in terms of speed, in terms of the ability to make plays, like these guys at the bottom of the lineup do much more than the Florida guys, in my opinion, So I think that had a huge hand in it. Jack Eichel, buddy, I want to talk about Jack Eichel because I know you picked Marchessault to win the Conn Smythe. You called that one, so I'll give you your props. I had Eichel, and to me, it's one of those ones where most of the time you get to the end of the finals and there's one, maybe 2 guys that you're debating on.
Yeah.
This one was interesting because also you can throw Aiden Hill in there. There was a case for Mark Stone, even though he was more of a long shot. There was a case for him. But to me, Jack Eichel, just on his first run in the playoffs, was the guy for me. Just 26 points in 22 games. He was dominant both sides of the puck. But I'm not mad about Marchessault getting it because him as an original misfit, him as being the guy who used to play for Florida. Come on, like that story, dude. That story is like something that I fear is going to happen to like the Leafs one day. They're going to get to the final and they're going to get just completely steamrolled by some guy they gave up.
Zach Hyman,
right? That must be painful for Panthers fans to see Marchessault scoring these goals. Even Riley Smith, right? It's crazy.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say that to me, man, it's actually weird because I feel like I don't know if it was game 2 Vegas smacked Florida. It was like 7-2 or whatever.
Yeah.
At that point, I actually was more on the even like seeing so we saw so many things from Marchessault throughout the playoffs, like obviously the hat trick and just like big time goal scoring. But I was even looking back on like throughout the finals, I was looking back on highlight packs and just seeing like how some of Marchessault's goals have been created. And just now even like, not even like the numbers, like just seeing how Eichel's, I would say like 200-foot game, like improved and escalated throughout the playoffs as well. And just the plays that he was setting up. And then obviously specifically in game 5, had 3 assists to show for and was just involved in every single play. My vibe shifted to Eichel a bit, if I'm being honest. Like I was Marchessault and the clips there to be seen. But honestly, man, by game 5, I was on Eichel for Conn Smythe train. So I was not that I was disappointed to see Marchessault, but I just think Eichel was the more creative and more, I would say, thought process pick, because if you watched every game, saw every dynamic of the game, sure, Marchessault was super clutch and had big time goals and scored or finished his opportunities. But I don't know, man, I just think in every facet of the game, Eichel was just everywhere. And I think the story is so cool with Marchessault, but I think even seeing that post-game interview with Eichel, like Sabres fans are just feeling it, man. Cause it's like that line. I mean, Sabres fans, you have a lot to be excited about. You have a lot to be excited about big time, but that line of like, I started getting excited.
I enjoyed coming to the rink again.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
And we've heard that. We've heard that from Ryan O'Reilly, right?
Yeah.
In the past when he left Buffalo. So when I heard that, I was like, I'm happy you took this there because I was actually going to bring that up where, you hear that and you're like, oh, like what a shot, like a little bit at Buffalo, right? But there's no doubt, like the player that he was picked at second overall, like the potential that so many people thought he would reach, man, in this finals, that's what we saw. I mean, throughout the playoffs, I feel like as they got deeper and deeper into it, like he was more and more dominant. And to me, it's wild that, different. Matthews is a different draft, but obviously he went 2 after McDavid, and to see Jack Eichel lift the cup before McDavid and before Matthews, if you told me that 5 years ago, I would have called you crazy, right?
Man, I think there was probably a lot of people that if you like put the circumstance in front of them, they probably would have been like, all right, McDavid's going to win a couple cups, at least like 3 or 4, maybe. Eichel might not even win a cup in Buffalo like his whole career. Like that probably would have been the conversation.
He was doubted as a 200-foot player too, I think.
Oh yeah. I mean, man, I said it with Buffalo. Yeah. There were some games like I still watch a decent amount of Sabres games, but like I'd watch some Sabres games and be like, is this guy okay? Like just, he would go through the motions, no defensive responsibility. Like it kind of reminded me of like what Mark Scheifele is like right now. Just like an absolute floater, like very skilled, very possession based, but just an absolute floater. That was Jack Eichel with Buffalo. This is not the Jack Eichel we get now. Like,
and you look at that and it's like, John, is that a product of the player being, in a system that doesn't work for him or in a city that doesn't work for him, and that's what's rubbing off on him? Or is that the actual player, right? Like if we might see Mark Scheifele, if he's dealt, blossom and become stronger defensively. I wouldn't put money on it, but it could happen, right? And Jack Eichel, you're seeing that here as an example with Vegas. Even O'Reilly like made a lot of those crazy decisions.
Well, I mean, it happens all the time. And I'm not comparing Eichel to Mark Scheifele, but with the O'Reilly situation, that's so relevant because it wasn't just Buffalo. It was also Colorado too. People forget that like there was like major beef between, I think it was O'Reilly and Duchesne. Maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but there was like major beef between those two guys. And obviously within like a year and a half later, both those guys were moved out. But there was like major question marks. And that's why I think this sport's so ironic, Lucas, because it's like, how can we go from like O'Reilly being a locker room cancer in Colorado, being a locker room cancer in Buffalo, and then all of a sudden he's like the glue that's putting St. Louis together. Like it's so ironic. And then the Leafs specifically acquired O'Reilly because he's that kind of guy, but he always wasn't. He wasn't always that guy. I'm laughing because it's just so funny. How can you do a 180 like that? And then like going to Eichel, it's like, man, it's like he always had that skill, but it's like such a different vibe. It's probably a mix of like culture, less. I don't want to say less responsibility because Eichel was still a star player as we saw, but like less, I would say, weight on his shoulders. Like he actually was able to spread it out versus like, oh, Eichel's our savior in Buffalo. Like he's got to do it all versus like you're coming into a system that like this team within 5 years has already been to a cup final. You have cup champs left and right on this team. And you have like also star players next to you. So I just feel like there was less weight on his shoulders. And also just like, I feel like when you have a coach like Bruce Cassidy, who's going to push more on that defensive responsibility side. Like, I mean, man, Eichel is just going forward too. Like the fact that you have him locked in at that, I mean, it's unreal, man. It's unreal that we saw this player within like a year and a half become this and win a cup.
Yeah. And man, I feel like him and Barbashev specifically just complemented each other so well. I hope that potentially that's like a marriage that they try to keep.
Oh, they've got to keep that, man. That trio is unreal.
Yeah, like they were such good line mates. I think they got to try to run that back. But Jack Eichel is I was reading I read on Twitter from, I forget who this is from now. I'll have to look back into it. So I'll try to give a shout in the bio at some point to the show. But I saw that Jack Eichel was the first player to win the Stanley Cup with over a $10 million AAV. So that's a little bit surprising. And then also,
that might have been Grav.
It was Grav. Bam. It was our boy Grav. And then also I read that there was only one first overall pick since 2008 who's won the Stanley Cup, which was Nathan McKinnon. Which just also blew my mind. Like some of these things, and that was from Drew Livingston. So I wanted to give a shout out too.
Yeah, no, that is wild. I mean, especially if you think about like some of the first overall picks that have dropped. Like we've already mentioned some of the names, like including McDavid and Matthews. So yeah, pretty nuts. JT. Just quickly, I talk about the depth again. Again, massive respects to Eichel. Huge shout out. And so funny, our boy Johnny Lazarus was partying with Eichel like into the wee hours of the morning in Vegas. Like that's also legendary shit. Big shout out to
buddy. I shot him a message and I was like, you better be, I hope you're like banged up this morning. Like the next day, this morning I shot him. He goes, buddy, so many stories. I'm like, man, we're gonna have to catch up and you're gonna have to let it ride.
Yeah,
you gotta hear those stories.
We gotta get him on the pod in the summer.
What was it? 5:40 in the morning. He's with Jack Eichel. You see their eyes, man. They look
they're toast. Yeah. Also, this is just so random, and maybe this is not even an agenda because it's like, bro, what the hell were you doing? What was Colin White doing like half injured for like 3 minutes without a stick or 2 minutes? Bro, I was losing my mind. I have no investment. And I'm like, how dumb are you, bro? You could literally skate for 10 seconds, half injured to get to the bench. And you would have been like, what was he doing, bro? Guy was just shadowing a defenseman and not doing anything. I don't think he blocked a shot. I don't think he got into the lane once. Guy was just literally hobbling around the ice for a couple minutes in the defensive zone. I'm like, bro, is Paul Maurice not losing his mind? Like, to keep it PG,
like screaming at him to come to the bench. Why is he not?
What are you doing, man? Yeah. Guy's injured without a stick. That is the most useless. Like, and then like the fact that Vegas ends up scoring, and that goal was like a massive shift. I think it was still 3-1 at that point.
Yeah.
That just crushed the game. Like that whole moment, it's like you talk, and that's why I just think some of these moments, because the team doesn't get scored on, but like that, like was like right there. That's
when the Stanley Cup was won. I swear, it was that
sums it up perfectly, because it's like the misfits were on that goal. What a play by William Karlsson, behind, like threw his legs behind to Riley Smith. So, and Riley Smith, again, a former Florida Panther, the guy that they literally dumped away. I think that's so ironic, but it's like, it goes back to the depth piece, man. It's like Vegas did it the right way. They built a deep team and then added the stars, brought them in, and built this complete team. Florida, I mean, it showed that they could do it, and they went on a run, but they obviously did more of like a rushed approach from their President's Trophy, and it created some holes in their depth, and those depth players got caught in that line change. And
honestly, I totally agree with you, bang on. But I'm happy you brought this one up, because I actually forgot about that shift, but I was screaming at my TV too. I don't understand when a player's stick breaks, period. Forget even the injury, right? When a player's stick breaks, there's some justification, if it's a penalty killer, if it's a specific type of player that can get in lanes, maybe to keep them on. I get it. Like, you don't want to abandon your team and be shorthanded.
Yeah.
But sometimes I genuinely just don't understand. Like, if you're that tired, or if you're injured and you don't have a stick, it's a double whammy. Get the hell off the ice and get somebody on who's going to have a stick and be healthy and fresh and ready to go. Yeah. I don't understand where these players are who's telling these players to stay on in that.
It's unreal.
Way. Like, it's insane, man.
Well, man, it's like this is different because I think the Leafs were shorthanded last year against Tampa in the playoffs. But I don't know if you remember this, but it was like, I think it was TJ Brody's stick that broke. So he had to stay on the ice. And David Kampf, just being new to life in this moment, didn't realize Brody had no stick.
And passed it to him.
And he had no stick, and then Tampa scores. I don't know what game that was in the playoffs, but like, that's what I'm just saying. Like, some of these scenarios, it's like, okay, you know what? At that point, the presence, like, especially if you're shorthanded, is important. But it's like, if you're at risk of being scored on anyways, like, is it not like the risk? Like, is it not worth the risk to literally just skate your ass to the bench
just go
for 5 seconds?
To just go shorthanded for 5 seconds, right?
Yeah. Like, at that point, it's like it rushes Tampa to maybe make a play, or rushes the opponent to make a play. It's like in that moment, you were getting dominated regardless, and you're literally doing nothing. I can't imagine. And honestly, I thought I was like maybe alone in it. I searched up Colin White like 30 seconds later, Lucas, and it was full. And I was like, okay, thank God I'm not like the only one watching what's going on here. So
or even when it happens, like there's other times where a similar situation happens where it's like one guy's hurt and one guy's stick breaks, or maybe two guys' sticks break. It's like, why are you just so content on staying on, just to have a 5v5 matchup? You're already shorthanded with the injury or the stick breaking. Colin White probably wishes he could do that over again. I mean, if the coaches weren't yelling for him, they probably wish they could do that over again.
No idea. Last quick thoughts just overall. So Vegas, obviously Cup champs. Do we have any other player we want to show? Like I said, I just think if you're, I know people are going to be pissed at Pietrangelo for the Draisaitl thing, but it's like, if you're not giving Pietrangelo his creds yet, I mean, guy in terms of games played once his career's done, and I mean, playing for Team Canada, just being one of the better defensemen in the league, 2-time Cup champ now.
World Junior gold.
You never know. Hall of Fame. You never know. It's
Listen,
a long shot. You never know.
Olympic gold? No. Okay.
What?
He's a Hall of Famer.
Okay, so you're locking it in. I was going to say, I thought you were
this shouldn't be a debate anymore. Like after this, I think he already had a good case. After this, 2 Stanley Cups, Olympic gold, World Cup gold. You know, he's got everything he could want to win. World Junior gold. You know, he's got the points to his name. Yeah. He's been a captain. I mean,
no, I'm with you, bro.
He's a Hall of Famer. Mic drop. It's over. He's a Hall of Famer. Come on.